Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Professor Sides, and this course is Principles of Microeconomics. We are again in Chapter 4, the market forces of supply and demand. This is the second installment in our lectures, and if you will remember from our first installment, we talked about quantity demanded or amount demanded, and it is what a consumer or purchaser or buyer is willing and able to buy, whether it's a good or a service. We talked about how that is represented graphically in the form of either a table or a chart or a graph. If it is in the form of a table, then we call that a demand schedule. And if it's a graph or a chart, it is called a demand curve, in that it shows the relationship between price and quantity. And the law of demand tells us that the relationship between price and quantity demanded or amount demanded is negative or inversely related, meaning that when the price of the good or service goes up, you, the consumer, will demand, the quantity you will demand will be less. Now, when we talk about why is this important, when we talk about why this is important, we know that this is important because as a business person, as a business entity, we need to know what the demand for our product, whether it's a good or a service, is. And then we also need to understand what are those things that affect demand, quantity demanded. So we know immediately that price affects quantity demanded. So what we set our price to will affect how much we can sell as a seller, because it's based on how much the consumer is willing and able to buy. Now, there are other factors, and this segment of the lecture will look at some of those other factors that impact demand. We call those demand shifters, demand curve shifters, and we will also talk about demand curve movement. A demand curve shifter is any change, any variable that would change the quantity demanded other than price. We know that if we change the price of, using our example from the previous lecture, if we change the price of lattes from $6 to $5, we know that that will increase quantity demanded. And likewise, if we change the price from $1 to $2, that would change the price of, that would change the amount or quantity demanded. So now we're going to look at what are those things other than price that would affect or impact or change the quantity demanded. The first one, the first variable, the first factor that would impact or change the demand curve is the number of buyers. The more buyers you have, the more demand there is for a product. And again, we're making the assumption that the buyer is willing and able to purchase the goods. So if I am selling ice cream and I have my one class, my 8 a.m. class, those are my buyers. And then in that class there's 6 students. So I have a quantity demand, my market demand for those 6 students will be at X level depending upon the price. Now, if I add more buyers, the price for my ice cream stays the same, but now I have more buyers. So if I included not just my 8 o'clock class, but my 10 o'clock class as well, and in my 10 o'clock class I have 22 students, now quantity demanded has increased, the 22 plus the 6, and so now I have 28 individuals demanding my product, even though my price did not change. And this would cause the demand curve to shift, and we'll talk about the shifting later. Right now we're just going to talk about those those variables that would cause the curve to shift. And what we see here is that if we started out here, we have the demand curve for the market demand curve for lattes from our previous lecture. At $6, as you can see, at $6, 6 individuals want the lattes. At $5, 9 people. At $4, you have 12. At $3, you have 15. At $2, you have 18. At $1, you have 21. And when it's free, you have 24. So these are the number of individuals. This is the quantity demanded for this product. Now, if we kept the price constant and we increase the number of buyers, then we would see a shift that looks like this. And what you will find is that we did not change the price. Let's say that we're selling our product at $5, but if we increase the number of buyers, the price is still $5, but now we have more individuals that are willing and able to buy the product. And so this, in this instance, caused the demand curve to shift to the right or shift outward. Income is our second variable that would cause the demand curve to shift. Now, when we talk about income, we also have to look at whether or not that good or service is a normal good or an inferior good. A normal good says that as my income increases, my demand, the quantity demanded, also increases. For example, as my income increases, I am going to want more of a particular product. When I am in college, if I have my own car, I am going to, when I graduate, I may want a newer car, a different car, a higher class car. And so the demand, my demand for cars increased as my income increased. An inferior good says that as my income increases, I want less of that good. So right now as a college student, I'm eating ramen noodles, but when I become a college graduate and my income increases, I'm less likely to buy the ramen noodles. And so the ramen noodles in this case is an inferior good. And again, as my income increases, then I will demand more goods and services. And we see this just in our everyday lives. If you've paid attention to your parents or those of us who have had a job, we started out at minimum wage and we bought whatever our minimum wage would afford. And then when we got a pay raise, we didn't save the extra. We went on and we spent more. As our income increases, we spend more. The third item, the third variable and factor is the price of related goods. If the price of one good goes up or down, what is the quantity demanded for another related good? And when we talk about related goods, there are two types of goods. There are substitutes and then there are complements. Substitute says that if the price of good A goes up, then I will want more of good B. For example, here we have Coke and Pepsi. That's the most popular example of substitutes. So if you go to the grocery store and a 2-liter bottle of Coke, the price of it goes up, unless you are just a die-hard Coke fan, 9 chances out of 10 you will switch and drink Pepsi because cola is cola. Because remember, again, in our first lecture we talked about in a perfectly competitive market the product is the same. So in this instance, cola is cola is cola, and so if the price of the Coca-Cola goes up, then the demand for Pepsi Cola will also go up, and that tells us that the two goods are substitutes. because I will want less of the Coke and more of the Pepsi because the Coke price went up. And that's if the related goods, those two goods are related, but they are substitutes. Now, if the price of good A goes up and my quantity demanded for good B goes down, then we say that the two goods are complements. Meaning, I'm going to, if the price of one good goes up, I really don't want to buy the other good because they go together. For example, if college tuition goes up to the point that I can no longer go to college, then I am less likely to buy textbooks. So college tuition and textbooks are complements. If the price of hamburgers go up, I am less likely to buy hamburger buns because hamburger buns are complements. The next demand curve shifter we will look at is taste. Some call this, you may also see the term preference. It's the same thing. And basically what we're saying is this, that if our tastes change, then that will impact demand. For example, now we look at music downloads. Our taste, our preference is for music downloads. But prior to that, it was CDs. And prior to that, it was cassettes. And prior to that, it was vinyl records, whether it was a 33 or a 45. And yes, I'm telling off on my age. But as our tastes change, then we will see that demand also changes. If we look at computers, we went from mainframe computers, which consumers did not purchase, to desktop computers. And from desktops, our preferences went to laptops. And from laptops to netbooks or notebooks. And from there to tablets. And from there to smartphones. And so as our taste and preferences changes, that also impacts quantity demanded. We are less likely to want to buy a desktop and more likely to want to buy a laptop and or a tablet. And because of that, then the quantity demanded for desktops shifts inward or to the left because there's less demand for those and for that product, and there's more demand for laptops and tablets and or smartphones. And the final demand curve shifter is expectations. And expectations, simply put, is just if I expect there to be a change in the future, then my demand for it now is affected. For example, if you have in your checking account $7 and you do not expect to get a direct deposit, your paycheck directly deposited until the end of the month, you are less likely to spend your $5 to $7 eating in the cafeteria. However, if it is the end of the month and you are expecting to get a direct deposit, your paycheck to be direct deposited in the next 24 hours, then you are more likely to go and eat because you know that in a short period of time, you're going to get more money. So because you're expecting that money to hit the bank, your demand for the cafeteria food at this point would increase. The price did not change, your expectations change. Now we also see this, another example that we see this in the market is individuals who would expect oil prices to go up and know that there's a relationship or a link between the price of a barrel of oil and the price you pay at the gas pump. If someone would expect that gas prices would go up, then you would expect to see long lines now at the gas station for people filling up not only filling up their tanks, but then bringing gas tanks um, uh, and filling those up so to get the cheaper price. So your expectation of what will happen in the future impacts how you buy or your demand now. So let's briefly look at a summary. There are there are 6 variables that can, if they change, 6 variables other than price, that if they change will shift 5 variables other than price, 5 variables other than price that will shift the demand curve. Price will move. If you will remember on the previous graph, we moved on the curve. The curve does not, the curve itself, the whole curve itself does not move, but we move from one point to the next point on the curve, along the curve. That's called movement along the curve. And then that's when we change price. Remember when we went from $6 to $5, we went from one point to the next point. That's movement along the curve. When we actually move the entire curve, then that's called a shift. And there are 5 variables for those shifts. We have number of buyers, the income change, price of related goods change, our taste or preferences change, and then our expectations change. Now, if price change, then on the curve, we'll move on the curve. If any one of these other variables change, then the curve, the entire curve, will shift outward to show an increase or inward to show a decrease. That concludes this lecture. I look forward to speaking to you again as we move through the market forces. Thank you. Have a good day.